Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss what we should expect for the 30th anniversary celebration of Resident Evil. So of course, on March 22nd, if I'm not mistaken, which is basically this weekend, we should be getting some Resident Evil news. For those of us in the States, we'll probably end up getting it on the 21st because of course, we're basically a day behind with the 14-hour difference. So I'm hoping that that's when we get our full announcement, and the rumors have been out there like crazy. Code Veronica. Even Nico Postolitis is like, man, if they did a Code Veronica remake, I'm sure fans will go crazy. I'm like, he knows. He knows for sure. Like, it's happening. It's happening for sure. And when that happens, I promise you, I will be annoying because I'm going to be talking about Claire all day, every day, because people will finally understand she was in Resident Evil 2 as well. Everybody talks about Leon, but Claire was there too. And I'm still pissed. This is the most minute spoiler ever for Resident Evil 9. Do not worry. I promise you. They don't even say Claire's name in the game. That's disrespectful. They don't really say anybody, like they barely reference anybody, which is super weird considering that story, but I won't get into it. If you haven't played the game yet, don't worry. But trust me, when you play it, you'll have the same problem that most people do, where it's just like, that's a little odd. But still, going into the celebration of 30 years of Resident Evil, the official date is March 22nd, and I'm looking forward to whatever we're gonna get. So this is where we hype ourselves up, try to be a bit realistic. Same thing happened with 9, where it was like, I want everybody to show up. I want this to happen. I want that to happen. Give me unlimited unlockables. I want all these costumes. I want everything. Like it's 30 years. So of course we just want that game to have like everything we could possibly dream of and ask for. But of course, I knew that was unrealistic. Hopefully most people knew that was unrealistic. But even some of the things we asked for weren't in that game. So, going into the 30th, like the official 30th anniversary, the number one thing, of course, is a remake announcement. I've said forever, and I've said it a million times in this series as well, it definitely should be Code Veronica as the next game. And my main thing for that is Wesker's side of things, because in the original storyline of the games, Code Veronica came out before 4 did. So it was Code Veronica where he was like a side antagonist where he pops up a little bit here and there. And then 4 came out and he was like barely involved. And it was like, oh crap, Wesker's like somewhat tangentially involved in this. And then 5, of course, comes out and he's like the main villain. For anyone that might be too young to have played 5, Wesker's gonna be the main villain when they eventually, hit us with the 5 remake. But switching the timeline around to where 4 comes first is actually really good. And I am curious how they're gonna do that, because technically in Resident Evil 4, with it being after Code Veronica, it's like a couple years after. But Code Veronica originally is like 3 months after Resident Evil 2. So I'm curious if they'll still stick with that version of the timeline where it's kind of like, hey, we're going backwards in time, or if they're gonna say that it's after Resident Evil 4, because technically they could do that if they wanted to. It wouldn't really change much. So I'm curious if they'll even reference like, hey, this was the, they don't do that even in Code Veronica. It's just like, that it's supposed to be a couple months later because, we just have all the information from the timeline, and it's just like, it's a couple months later, but they don't make a big deal, excuse me. They don't make a big deal out of that in the game, where it's like, a couple months ago, I was in Raccoon City with my buddy Leon. Like, Claire doesn't do all that. It's just like, okay, it just is. And then I think eventually through the game, you find out like, kind of a decent time frame. Or I think really it's just the files, because all the files are always dated on everything. So I think that's a big part of how people even knew what it was. But they, like I said, they don't make a big deal about it in the actual game. Like, that was 3 months ago. But I'm curious how they'll handle that, because obviously they're, retconning all sorts of stuff. But it could be in some nebulous timeline where they just never say the actual year of the remake. And that could be totally fine too, because they're all flashbacks at this point. So it wouldn't even matter if they reference that it was actually after RE4 or not. But if they do, that would make it interesting, which I think they will, because of just how they're rewriting the timeline. It would actually make sense to say like, yes, Resident Evil 4 in this new remake timeline did happen before Code Veronica officially. Like, it won't be a flashback where it's just like, yeah, that happened back then. I think they'll actually do it, and they might even reference RE4 in Code Veronica, which would be super cool. Leon does get referenced. That was I was gonna say that's the first time that happens, but it's not. And the really weird thing about it is that the first game that references another Resident Evil game, where they like, obviously if we go to Resident Evil 2, that was like, hey, they're referencing it, where it's like the very second game, like the whole point was that Claire went there. But when the first time they did it, where it was kind of just out of nowhere, was technically Survivor where the main character there was like, yeah, my buddy Leon sent me, so Survivor's still canon, and they're not gonna remake that, which would be crazy if they did. But it was like, you know, my buddy Leon. And then when Code Veronica came out, Code Veronica references Survivor and then also references Leon, because they reference Sheena Island. Super weird that they do that. But they reference Leon in there, so it, you know, either way it works, where they could just be like, yeah, that happened, and you know, it'll be interesting to see. But Code Veronica remake is like the number one thing that I'm personally expecting. Now, we've had the other rumors where they're like, hey, this is, you know, at this point we have like a timeline rumor where it's like Code Veronica, I think it was like Code Veronica 10, then 0 remake, and then the 1 remake, or it might even be Code Veronica remake, then 0, then 10, then the 1 remake. But either way, we have like a full timeline of like 4 games that are supposedly coming out. Apparently the leaker that did it, if I remember right, his name is Dust Golem. He's fairly good at what he does. So Code Veronica, I'm like, yeah, that just makes sense. I'm very curious if they would still even announce the other ones, even if they end up being true when they're ready to announce them, you know, like a year later, or maybe even at the end of this year. I would still be kind of shocked if we got like 4 straight up announcements where they're like, here you guys go, Code Veronica's coming out, you know, into next year or beginning of next year, and then after that we're doing 0, and then we're doing 10, and then we're doing 1 right after, and here's like the 4 game timeline that we're guaranteed to put out, or at the very least expect. I don't know if Capcom's really canceled too many games, but when it comes to Resident Evil, I don't think at this point, I don't think we're gonna have to worry about canceled Resident Evil projects anymore. But I'd be kind of shocked if they ended up doing that. I would love to see it if they were like, hey, here's a full-on timeline so you just straight up know what to expect. And I think one thing that fascinates me, where the rumor is kind of like, hey, we're gonna get like 2 remakes before we get the next game because it's been remake new game. I kind of don't hate that, solely because of the fact that if they're doing like an extra break before going to the next mainline title, then I'm going with, you know, once again, I'm going with all the hope side of things. That means that they're gonna put more into that game, because it's like, hey, we're gonna do 2 remakes, and that'll give us like an extra set of, you know, years, you know, at least like an extra 2 or 3 years before we have to put out the next mainline title. And that means we can put more work into it. We can have more time with, I don't know, however many actors we need in this game, because it's the 10th game. And at this point, you know, I mean, who knows about the DLC when it comes to 9? Who knows who's going to be in that, what the official story is going to be. There's rumors about that as well. But when it comes to 10, as far as speculation and stuff, everybody, well, most people I think are saying what I'm saying, where it was like Chris and Jill. You know, like we put importance on numbers. It's the 10, you know, I'm doing air quotes right now, but it's the 10th game. And so it's like, yeah, you bring back Jill and Chris for Resident Evil 10, and however they do it. I saw somebody say, what if they called it Biohazard and like the I and the O were the 10? I'm not gonna lie, I'll be in love with that. If they did it, I'll be totally happy. Resident Evil Biohazard, I'd be totally happy with that, which technically they already did for 7, I think was when they did that, where it was like Biohazard Resident Evil in Japan, and it was obviously Resident Evil Biohazard here. But if they did it a second time, and they did like the that's not bad. I'm not gonna lie, I'd be totally fine with that too. If they just do it twice, and it's like, that's cool. Like, who cares? It's awesome. So if they do that, that's totally great. But the 10th game, Jill and Chris, the weird stuff with the BSAA, because once again, you know, just situations and stuff going on, connections, whatever they do with Wesker, like, I don't know if they're gonna change things or add extra context when it comes to Code Veronica, because we'll probably get 10 before we get like the 5 remake. But you know, there's still a lot of questions there, because they could do some stuff. Wesker does show up enough in Code Veronica that it's important, and especially with them doing it in the remake style, they might have extra new plans. I mean, they've already done certain things that we've seen, so I'm very curious about that. But the Code Veronica remake is like the number one thing I want to see, and I would love it if they did put out, you know, I mean, admittedly, being a nerd, I can't get too behind, you know, the future timelines. If, you know, if you're going into like MCU stuff and all, and Star Wars and everything, they're always like, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this, and then it was like, well, we did one of those things, and everything else we canceled. So, you know, like I said, I don't think we should be concerned when it comes to canceled Resident Evil projects. It seems simple enough, but man, nerdy timelines have been real tragic in like, what, the last straight up 10 years. It's just been like devastation after devastation. It's like, I would love to see this. It's like, well, that's great. Keep hoping for it, buddy, because we're not doing it anymore. It's like, oh, okay, why'd you show me that? So, you know, it's kind of kind of a double-edged sword on that one. I'd love to see a timeline officially from Capcom, but at the same time, it's a little worrisome. Heck, even the old leaks, when they go back to Marvel, Insomniac Games, when they got hacked, there was a whole timeline there, and one of those timelines was like, hey, there's supposed to be like a solo Venom game and stuff like that. Haven't heard anything about that. I don't think it's still happening because it's been a hot minute. It could still happen. We don't really know. You know, Tony Todd, unfortunately, he passed away, so I don't know if that was a part of why they might have canceled it or what, but we just don't really know. Could still happen, once again. But there's a lot of stuff that was on that timeline where it's like, this is gonna happen and that's gonna happen, and none of that stuff happened either. So once again, timelines, little iffy. They give you a lot of hope for things that you wanted to see anyway, and then it's just like, eh. So we'll see what happens with that, but Code Veronica is definitely the thing that I'm expecting and the thing that I want the most. And then after that, there's a slight reference at the Capcom spotlight where, you know, this is where I'm getting this from, by the way, where they're like, hey, the official, you know, Resident Evil 30th anniversary is March 22nd. They straight up say that in the spotlight. Like, they didn't announce anything new. They were just like, hey, the Symphony, which was, I think, the first and only thing they really announced as far as like 30th anniversary stuff, and like the anniversary pack that you can get on the Switch. Other than that, it was old, you know, it was all old news, but then they're like, hey, March 22nd. So that's why I think they're actually going to do something, because they straight up did it in the Capcom spotlight. Like, hey, you know, the actual date is March 22nd. So we're not doing anything today. And it was kind of just like, oh, I thought you guys were going to say something cool about RE9, and they didn't. But they talked about the Symphony, and they did reference Universal Studios, where they're going to do the biohazard stuff again. And I believe they referenced that they might actually be doing some stuff in the States. So I hope that is officially the case. I would love to see that as an announcement. That would definitely get me to go to Universal. Like, I haven't been, probably a decade. That'll get me to go. I can get some Resident Evil stuff, and granted, they've done that before, but I think it's all been overseas. I don't think they've done any of that outside of Japan. If they brought that to the States, that would be amazing. I would love to see that. So I hope that's an announcement that we get, and that it's gonna stay for a very long time so I can save up some money. But I would love to get that as an official announcement where they're like, hey, we're gonna do like a full stint at Universal. It's not going to be like, hey, this 1 week or whatever, you have to be here to see Resident Evil. If they do like a couple months, like 3 months span, that would be fantastic. So a bunch of people can get to see it. Because if there's one thing when it comes to Resident Evil, we don't get any effing merch, and all the events are in Japan. Like, you can't see crap unless you're in Japan, or like very rarely they do stuff here in the States. Like, sometimes I reference the fact that when they did the RE7 thing where it was in VR, they were doing like a tour across the US, and I was able to go to that, and that was really cool, which I have an insanely old video on if you guys want to see that. But that was super cool. I always remember to this day, they didn't have the rights to sell at that event because it was in like Ann Arbor, Michigan. I wanted that liquor plush so bad, and they had the tote. I saw it open, and it was just a bunch of little liquor plushes, and they just couldn't sell them, and I was pissed. To this day, I think about that, like, that's so they just couldn't sell. Like, that doesn't even make sense to me. But they couldn't effing sell anything, so I couldn't get a liquor plush because it wasn't allowed. I think of that a lot. I really do. And it's so sad I think of that, but I think of that all the time where I'm like, man, I wanted that liquor plush so bad. For anyone that doesn't know what I'm talking about, it's like it's a tiny little liquor, and I think the tongue was like 2 feet longer, like a foot longer, something crazy. Like, I think it really was like 2 feet long. And it was just ridiculous. It was like, this is so silly. I wanted that so bad, and I couldn't buy anything. But I got some cool posters, and I got a little zombie face. That was nice, but I wanted that plush so bad. But that's the one event I've ever gone to in the US as it pertains to Resident Evil. So I would love for them to announce something with Universal and them doing like a full-on stay. Like I said, at least for a couple of months, doing like a little biohazard, Resident Evil installation where it's just really cool. So I hope we do get that. And if they do it, of course, it'll probably, it probably won't be like a 3-month span like I would love to see. But they'll be like, hey, in October, classic spooky month, for 1 month, you better be here. So if they say that, then I might try to pull something off, especially because my birthday's in October. I might try to pull something off and, try to get down there, because that would be absolutely phenomenal. But the other thing that I'm looking forward to seeing, or hoping to see, because admittedly, I already said it like a minute ago, we don't get merch. 30 years, we get nothing. Like, we get a couple shirts. We get a Symphony. Once again, only in Japan. They'll probably announce them. They said there were going to be dates in the States for that one. So we'll see. Or maybe they didn't say that, but maybe that's a part of what they'll announce as well. The Symphony will come to the US. But we don't get merch. I'm hoping that they announce some good stuff. Like, we got a couple of things coming out, some overpriced watches, some overpriced figures. the crappier versions of the overpriced figures if you get the amiibos, which is what I'm going for. I'm like, I'll get the amiibos. I'm not spending like the $200 on what would be the collector's edition figures. I'm not gonna do that. I don't care. So I'll get the crappy, cheap amiibo versions. I'll probably do the same for I forgot the girl's name, but the little girl from Pragmata. I'll probably do the same for that. Like, yeah, I'll get the cheap amiibo. I'll settle with that. That's fine. So I'm pretty much good on that. But I would love to see some other merch. I would love to see, they're probably gonna do shirts. They always love to slap a couple shirts out there. So that would be nice. I would love to see something that doesn't say Resident Evil 9 X Porsche. I want something else. I do not want that. So that's just a me personal thing. Like, I don't want an effing Resident Evil X Porsche thing. Like, just give me a Resident Evil shirt, please. So something outside of that would be phenomenal. Because I know there's some stuff up that you can get, but it's all specifically for Requiem. I want a few other, types of merch. So hopefully they announce some shirts. That would be nice. I would love it, and this won't happen, but I would love it if they were like, hey, we know you guys like Resident Evil, and we know as Capcom, we've done a horrible job putting out Resident Evil figures. We put out Street Fighter every goddamn day of the week, but we won't do anything for anybody from Resident Evil. So at some point, if they were just like, hey, here's a figure line that we're coming out with, I would be ecstatic. If they were just like, we partnered up with this company, I don't care if it's McFarlane, I don't care if it's Mezco, I don't care who it is, as long as it looks good, obviously. But just, if they put out a figure line for Resident Evil where they're like, hey, it's a 30th anniversary action figure line, here's like the characters from this game, and this game. You can buy them at this date. I would be so happy. I would love to see them do an action figure line for Resident Evil. It has been such a long time, and I mentioned this in some video a while ago, but Capcom is like notorious for not working with companies. I don't know what it is specifically when it comes to Resident Evil, I guess, but there was a company that was officially licensed doing 1/6 scale figures, which are like the more expensive version, of course, but they were officially licensed to do Resident Evil, and Capcom just stopped talking to them after the Resident Evil 2 remake. Like, I was so excited, like, man, they're gonna do the 3 remake, they're gonna do 4 remake, and they did phenomenal figures. They put basically every weapon in the game you got with the character. It was like everything that you could want, you pretty much got. The only thing that was missing was, like, for Claire, they didn't put the electric shot in from the remake. That's literally the only weapon that they didn't put in, which really sucks, because that's like a very cool looking weapon, so I really wish that was in there. But that's like the only weapon in the game that she gets that they didn't put in the box. Other than that, it was phenomenal. I got Leon, I got Claire. I didn't want Ada, admittedly, I didn't want Ada, but she got the typewriter. That really made me upset. I was like, dang, I didn't like her costume as much. I like her classic costume personally, but they did great figures. And I was like, I can't wait for them to do the RE3 remake. And then I was waiting forever, and then it just never happened. And they specifically said Capcom just stopped talking to them. They stopped responding, basically. So if Capcom got on it and they're like, hey, people like action figures, there's a bunch of companies. For anyone that might be into the figure realm, there are a buttload of third-party companies doing unlicensed versions of the characters, so you can easily find characters. I got a couple of Jill, I got a Claire, the Claire and Leon I got are licensed, but I do have another unlicensed Claire figure as well. But you can get a bunch of great figures that are unlicensed, and there's even one coming out that I'm thinking of picking up. It's a 1/12 scale figure of the OG version of Nemesis, and they have Nemesis and Nemesis Type 2, and I was like, ooh, that would be kind of cool to have them both. But if I only get one, I'm gonna get them in like in his classic like full outfit. So I'm probably gonna end up picking that up because I'm like, ooh, I wanted a classic Nemesis so bad. I would love a 1/6 scale version, but that would also be huge because the dude is tall. But I hope we get an action figure line. Honestly, I think that's the most unrealistic thing I could ask for. Like, I could probably ask for a shadow drop, and that would probably be more likely than us getting an action figure line announced in, as a Capcom celebration thing. So probably the least likely thing to happen, but I would love action figures as a part of Resident Evil merch to just come back, at least for a limited time. If they just did like a pre-order window where it was like, hey, if you pre-order, then you get it. That's probably my favorite thing, because honestly, Capcom is horrible with their side. I did a whole video on that when it comes to the deluxe edition that we just dealt with, where it's like, they need to put on more. I also recently found out they did like, was it 17,000 of those? Or 1,700? It was an insanely small amount for the deluxe editions, because they're numbered. People didn't know that, but they, my Resident Evil group, they put that on there like, hey, these are actually numbered, and you get like a card with your number on it. And it was like 17,500. Resident Evil 9 sold 5 million copies in 5 days, and they put out 17,000 of the deluxe edition. That's absolutely ridiculous. They should really be ashamed of themselves. There's no reason that they should have put out 17,000 for Resident Evil's 30th anniversary. That's insane to me. So, that's a huge problem for me personally. But that's also why it's probably less likely that outside of some t-shirts, some super cheap t-shirts, they're not going to be doing figures. But yeah, like I said, that's hopium, if we're being honest. But I would love to see some figures come out. I don't think they're gonna talk anything about the live action movie. I think they'll stay as far away from that as they can. But it would be cool if they announced a new CG movie. That would be pretty awesome. I would love to see that. That would be a great announcement. I'd be like, okay, because I actually watch those. So for me, that's a huge announcement. Like I'd be ecstatic for that one. But once again, we'll see what happens with that. I think that would be a really cool announcement to say, hey, I assume it wouldn't end up coming out this year. Although they could. I mean, the last one, Death Island, was 2022, if I'm not mistaken, or like 2023. So it's been a couple years. So they could have easily been working on it, especially going into the stuff with RE9 and stuff like that. It's possible they had a plan. I would love to see it. That's one of the tricky things when it comes to our gaming companies, and it's like, hey, 30th anniversary. There are a lot of 30ths this year, oddly enough. Like Pokemon is 30th. I think Legend of Zelda is doing its 40th right now. And there was something else that was in its 30th that I didn't realize as well. So there are actually like a couple of big anniversaries, and it's always like, is anybody gonna do anything? I hope so. Even for Nintendo, they don't really do much unless it's Mario. But we'll see what happens. I'm excited. I'm very excited. I mean, it's the official anniversary. They're gonna announce something. So I'm sure I'll be happy in some way. And in all honesty, all I need is the remake, and I'm set. Especially if they hit it, it won't come out this year. But what if it did? Wouldn't that be nuts? I might be a little scared if they were like, yeah, it's coming out this year. I'd be like, Resident Evil 3, it was too close. Like, I'd be super scared if anything came out close at this point. It would terrify me, because I'm like, we don't need that. And if they screw over Claire again, I'm gonna be real messed. I'm gonna be hurt. I'm gonna take that as a personal attack. But I am excited, of course, for where we're headed, and I do hope we get some really good stuff, because it's 30 years. I did a video a while ago, like, what do we want from the 30 years? And I was like, hey, the anniversary's coming up. What should we expect this weekend? That's where we are. It's like, this weekend, what in the world should we be expecting? So, March 22nd is the official anniversary. Like I said, if you're in the States, we'll probably end up getting that info on Saturday, so tomorrow. But we'll see what ends up happening. I'm hoping we get some good stuff. I'm hoping we get some great stuff. But I want to know what you guys think. So please, put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know what you want to see, what you're hoping for, what you want to see that we're not going to get. Like I said, the action figure thing is mine. But if you guys are like, hey, I want new comic books and stuff, it's like, please hope. Just hope. I'd be happy too. But if you got a crazy thing, I would love to hear like what wild thing they won't do, but you just want to hope anyway. So please, definitely put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.